My name is Rachel Goodman-Moore. I am a Senior Product Manager for AppSheet, and I'm very excited to be introducing the esteemed Reese Phillips from Airbus. He asked me not to say esteemed, but I felt like I had to because he is esteemed to us. And we will be talking about, or Reese will be talking about how he has helped Airbus to foster a culture of innovation everywhere through citizen development. Now, while he is currently responsible for change and workplace transformation at Airbus, prior to that, he spent 10 years, I think it was, researching lightning strikes effects on planes. So it is very appropriate that he is giving us a lightning talk here today. And I am very excited to introduce Reese. For the next 15 minutes or so, we'll be talking about, as it says, fostering a culture of innovation everywhere through citizen development. And then we'll have some time at the end left over for question and answer. So I'm going to step off. I'm going to give Reese the stage and we'll jump right in. Please give Reese a warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Innovation, to be successful, tends to need to meet three criteria. It needs to tick three boxes. Your innovation, first of all, it needs to work, right? It needs to be technically feasible. And I guess that isn't a surprise to anyone. That's probably the one that most people realize. But there's two other strands to a successful innovation which are perhaps not always thought about at the start of that innovation process. There needs to be a business case behind it, or in other words, it needs to be financially viable. If your innovation costs more or costs so much that the cost outweighs the benefit, it might work, but it won't really be considered to be a successful innovation. But the third aspect is arguably the most important one, or the one that at least gets forgotten the most. The innovation has to appeal to the target audience. It has to solve a real problem, and it has to solve it in a way that the people who have that problem are going to be happy to use it or to enjoy using it. Now at Airbus, we make pretty cool things. We make things that fly. So we make planes, we make helicopters, we make satellites, we make rockets which take those satellites up into space. So we have to do a lot of innovation. In fact, innovation is really one of the backbones of the ethos of our company. And that also means that we have a lot of very creative, very smart people who do that innovation. And this is all great. We've got plenty of people who innovate. We generate our products and therefore our profit from those innovations. But at some point, you have to reinvent yourself a little bit to make sure that you're still innovating and that you're still ahead of the game. And a few years ago, Airbus realized that one of the things we needed to do was to become a more data-driven company. So we launched a big digital transformation project in order to ensure that our long-term innovation would still be secure. One aspect of that digital transformation, and it was not the only one, but one aspect was a decision to change our productivity suite, to move from an on-premise legacy productivity suite to Google Workspace in the cloud, for a number of reasons, but including putting that data into the cloud, making it accessible and transparent to those who need access to it. That helps to allow us to become more data-driven. But there was also a psychological aspect. We piloted different tools, and what we found was that by changing the tool set, it actually helped people to change their ways of working. And our digital transformation was not about just, okay, how can we better use the data that we already have? Because we've always had loads of great data. It was also about how can we foster a culture of innovation via this digital transformation. So we moved to Google Workspace, and there's plenty of challenges in doing that, despite the benefits. I'm not going to spend time today talking about change resistance, for example, which is a big part of it. But there was something that we discovered as we started this transformation. And the thing that we discovered was approximately 10,000 pieces of code that you would probably call shadow IT, or that we would call at Airbus business-owned tools. So pieces of code, pieces of script, software that has been developed by people outside of the IT department, where we had no visibility of it. There was no way that we could track it. We didn't know where it existed, who was using it, what it did. And that's fine when it's just a macro in a spreadsheet that changes the color of some lines automatically for you. But when that macro grows to the point that it's being used on the shop floor and it becomes a business critical process to produce an aircraft, and there's no tracing of it, that can become a problem. And okay, I guess we're lucky that it didn't become a problem, but there's a risk there. I mean, there's a risk of the fact that it might not have gone through all the checks it needs for cybersecurity. There's the risk that the person who wrote that script leaves the company and 10 years later it stops working and nobody knows how to fix it or what it did. So this was a sort of a daunting thing for us. We thought, how are we going to transform 10,000 pieces of script to work in this new environment where those scripts won't work? But it was actually kind of an opportunity. It was daunting to start with, but we quickly learned that this was an opportunity to clean, an opportunity to reassess what we had and what we still needed, and then an opportunity to rebuild what we needed with some governance in place. And so this is something that Google Workspace has really helped us with, because whereas we had zero visibility with the legacy tools, with Google's low-code, no-code tools, AppScript and AppSheet, we do have that visibility. We can see who is making what and who is using what, and this was a very positive thing. But as soon as you use the word governance to certain people, you risk stifling innovation. And so the challenge we actually had here was, how do we put a governance in place and ensure that Airbus can still innovate? Because you could say, okay, there's this mess. We don't want to just rebuild the mess in another language. So we're going to lock everything down. We're going to stop anyone from being able to write a script or develop an application or deploy anything. And yeah, you could do that, but you're not going to innovate, at least not through, you're not going to get the digital innovation that our company thrives on. So we had to come up with a better way of doing it. And again, the benefits of the Google tools being in the cloud has actually allowed us to do that. So putting the right governance in place is kind of the first lesson that we've learned. And I won't go through all the details, but as an example with AppSheet, at Airbus, everybody has access to AppSheet. So we have 200,000 users. They can all use any AppSheet application that has been deployed to them by someone who's created that application. But they cannot create applications just like that. If they want to create an application, there is a kind of a governance process, but it's light. They have to sit through a 1-hour online session where we go through all the security rules and guidelines we expect them to follow, where we ask them to tick a simple Google form to say, yes, I'm not going to break the rules. And then they're free to build applications. This is all automated, by the way. So we've got AppScript and APIs which are checking who attended that Google Meet session, so we know if they've attended. Of course, we can see who's filled in the Google form. And if they meet those two criteria, they get automatically added into a Google group. And within an hour of the two criteria being met, they're able to build applications in AppSheet. So this is, I think, a good balance of governance. It protects us, but it's not too heavy for either the end user or for us to administer it. But governance on its own is not enough. So, okay, we've now got people who can build applications in AppSheet. And there's another governance process if they want to deploy those applications, which I won't go into the details of. But at some point, there's some other pillars that you need to make sure that this works. And the second pillar is around training. You can say, here's a bunch of tools, and if you do this 1-hour session, you're allowed to use them, and you can now do what you want with them as long as you follow the rules. That doesn't necessarily mean that the outputs are going to be optimized. And of course, what we don't want to happen is for people to make inefficient code or to make apps that actually perhaps didn't need to be made, or to even pick the wrong tool, to try building something in AppScript, which they could have done without code in AppSheet. So training was needed. And at Airbus, we're a very specific company. Not only are we making these sort of huge products, but those products go through a lot of regulation. And so a lot of the time, generic training courses that we find online or on the market aren't actually good enough for us. We tend to need bespoke training courses. And so we invested a lot of time and a lot of energy into making bespoke training courses for both AppScript and AppSheet. And I think off the top of my head, we've got about 45 hours of training curriculum on AppScript and around 20 hours on AppSheet. No one's expected to do 65 hours of training, by the way, but depending on your needs and the requirements, you pick the modules that you want. But these have been developed in-house inside Airbus by Airbus for Airbus. And this, I would say, is the kind of the second learning here that other companies might benefit from. Yes, you need the right governance, but you also need to make sure that any training you deploy is actually tailored to your audience. So our AppSheet training is use case based, and we take use cases that make sense for Airbus employees, not just the standard sort of more generic use cases that you might find online. So, okay, we've now got a set of tools deployed. We've got a governance behind it to make sure that those tools are not abused. And we've got training in place so that people know how to use them and make the most of them. All sounds great. There's still a third pillar, and this is where citizen development comes in. Most of the people who are using those tools are not professional developers. They're not software engineers. They're people who've learned how to code or learned how to script because they've needed to do that optimize day-to-day tasks in their jobs, or perhaps they needed to do that in a previous life. And they might be coming from anywhere. They might be in IT, but they might be in engineering or finance or HR or communications. We really see them across the company. And if you just let them get on with it, even with the training in place, okay, you might not have a huge risk there, but you miss out on an opportunity. And that opportunity is about bringing that community together, because there's kind of I would add a fourth pillar. I talked about 3 pillars of innovation, which are sort of the widely accepted sector pillars of innovation. I would add a fourth one, which is collaboration. Your innovation will be stronger if you collaborate. And if we, instead of having silos of citizen developers in each department, if we bring them together as a community, we figured that this would actually be more powerful. And this is what we did. We launched what we call our Google Workspace Transformers. This is a community of around 1,200 people across the company who've put their hand up to say, I want to get involved. I want to upskill myself in these new tools. I don't just want to talk about transformation. I want to do it. I want to take our macros and convert them for my team. Or I want to take this paper-based process on the shop floor and build a mobile app in AppSheet to automate it. So we've got this community, but that community needs to be animated. And a big part of what me and my team are doing is animating this community. And this is something that I think we're actually quite proud of, because we do a number of things. We bring them together at least once a month, and we bring them together for different types of events. But for one example that we do is something we call our Low Code, No Code show. It's like a TV show where in about 40 minutes, one of our expert trainers builds an application either in AppScript or AppSheet from zero to fully working application live on the screen. So it really demonstrates to people, particularly new transformers who might be wondering how much effort is this going to take, we can show them that you can do this with very little effort. We also launched something called Transformation Clubs. Transformation Clubs are kind of like show and tell day at school, or an open mic night at a karaoke bar. It's where we ask our transformers, our citizen developers, have you worked on something cool recently? Maybe you want to share it with the rest of the group. And they sign up for a slot. They get 10 minutes in a Google Meet slot to just show us something they've done or something that they're trying to do. And they might do that because they just want to show it off. They might do that because it might inspire some others. It might be that they need some help or some support. Whatever their motivation is fine with us, but it means that they start to share with each other. They give feedback to each other. This also reduces a little bit the risk of duplication. And when it comes to duplication, another big part of this is something called a transformation gallery. So we've made an AppSheet application which allows you to upload your AppScript codes and link your other AppSheet applications, so that before you start building anything, you go and check if one of your fellow citizen developers already did something. Because even if they didn't do exactly the same thing, they might have done 80% of the work for you. Most recently, we have done 2 new event formats over the last couple of years, and the COVID pandemic kind of pushed us into one of these formats, but it's actually become so successful that we will keep doing it. I mentioned that there were difficulties in moving from our legacy tool set to Google Workspace. And one of those difficulties is that there are some missing functionalities in the editors. There's also a bunch of integrations with other tools which just don't exist and need to be built in-house. We've launched a quite innovative hackathon format. I mean, hackathons themselves, of course, are quite common, but we've done something in Airbus which allows us to do hybrid hackathons with people all around the world competing either in physical teams or in remote teams, depending on their preference. and they're set challenges and problem statements by our business leaders. So you might have someone in finance who says, we're really missing this functionality in Google Sheets, and if you can fix it, I'll give my Excel license away. So we put that to a team in the hackathon, and they'll spend 3 days in an animated event building a solution where they also upskill themselves on low-code, no-code tools. We teach them also how to deliver a pitch so that at the end of the week they can pitch those results to their stakeholders. And this, not only does it provide very concrete and tangible technical solutions, it also helps foster that community. And as a result of this, once the world started opening up again a bit, we've now launched a kind of a physical version of this in a condensed format. We call it a transformation laboratory. These are one-day events which are specific to a location. So we go to a particular Airbus plant or a particular Airbus office. We spend some time assessing, okay, what do you do here? Where are your inefficient processes that maybe we could automate? And then we animate this Transformers community to build solutions. They get trained. They also get trained in innovation techniques like design thinking. And they finish the week again with a whole day workshop, building solutions, pitching those solutions at the end. And all of these three things, these three pillars, having the right tools, having the right governance in place, and then animating that network of citizen developers to make sure that they can get the most out of it, this together is how we've managed to ensure that Airbus can continue to innovate everywhere using the power of citizen development and low-code, no-code tools. So with that, I think we're going to take some questions to finish, right? You're not allowed to speak, Rachel.
Yes, there it is. Yes, we are going to take some questions. I don't know that I needed a mic for that, but we are going to take some questions. We have about 8 minutes to do it. So please, if you have a question, raise your hand and I'll come run out and give this mic to you and we can get that started. All right, here we go.
Do we have to take a micro? Oh, you're taking the mic. Okay.
Excuse me.
Thanks.
I get a chair.
Great talk. Really
Thanks.
really interesting. It's a kind of a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Bottoms up business people, doing automation. My question for you is this. Obviously, there's limitations to the tool set that you're providing for citizen development in terms of its appropriateness and fit for certain kinds of larger scale automations, right? So how do you, as an organization, decide what are we going to do with citizen development versus what processes might you say, well, or automations, and you know what I'm getting at? How do you make that trade-off, and how do you work well with both the IT and governance stakeholders in that regard and the business users in that regard?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it is a challenge because sometimes you'll have both an official team in the IT department who thinks they should own something, but you've got citizen developers who think that they can deliver it faster and maybe more tailored to their needs. I'm not sure we'll ever get it perfectly right, but we have put in place a sort of a decision tree which allows users to kind of assess, if I'm trying to do this, firstly, should I be doing it, or should I be asking someone to manage this officially within the IT department? If I'm doing it, which is the best tool to use? And sometimes, even when it's been built by a citizen developer, it will, at a later stage, be handed over. And we have examples, for example, of app scripts that we've now deployed as add-ons. So they were written by someone on their own. They made a script that was useful to them in Google Docs. They've shown it to us and we've gone, ooh, actually everyone needs that. So we're going to take that code off you and we're going to turn it into an add-on in the internal
good design
marketplace.
idea, essentially, you harvest for that. So the second question, I'm sorry, it's really related to what you said. Have you looked at any of the PMI citizen development certifications to enable it exactly the way you're talking about?
I don't think so.
Look it up. PMI. It's a project management organization.
Yeah, I know the.
No, of course you do, right?
But I know
they
PMI,
have
but I'm
exactly
not sure
what you
in this context.
I don't work for them, by the way. Exactly what you described. They have a whole methodology and training for it. It's very interesting. Everybody's converging on the same ideas. Thanks.
I think that's something that's. I hadn't realized that PMI were working in that area, so we can take a look. Any other questions? We should have planted some questions. Why didn't we think of that? There's a question.
We got one. All right. Thank you for not making me walk very far.
So it sounds like you're about a year or more into your program, and I'm wondering what kind of things you're focused on or prioritize working on now. What kind of challenges are coming up now, and how are you working through those challenges?
Yeah. So it depends what we mean by the program. We are about 5 years into the deployment of Google Workspace. Airbus is complex. We have 3 divisions, the bit that makes planes, the bit that makes helicopters, and the bit that makes defense and space stuff. And the plane part is kind of further ahead because we don't tend to deal with military data, so it's a bit easier. So we're kind of fully deployed. The other divisions are following. In terms of the removal of our legacy tool set, so we launched our decommissioning program January 2021, so 2.5 years ago, and depending on how you measure it, we're somewhere between 60 and 80% of the way through that in terms of removal of the legacy tools within the commercial aircraft division. But personally, I'm keen to not just see the transformation as just about removing the old tools. It's really about showing the added benefits. And so some of the focus right now is how do we're deploying AODocs for document management. How do we make sure that our legacy document management tool, which is going to have to remain there for some time, can still also link to the Google environment so that we don't have a confusion for end users about which tool to use and where to put their data. Working very closely with Google and SAP to develop SAP integration is a big task that's ongoing as well. So they're probably the 2 biggest enablers. Other than that, we're also we're going around all of our plants, so the shop floors where they actually build the planes, and assessing, okay, what are you doing here that maybe could be moved to an AppSheet application. And there's simple things. There's paper forms that now they can scan a QR code and fill in on their phone, for example, but which are very, very basic, but really transform their ways of working on the shop floor in terms of efficiency.
Cool. And just one follow-up question about, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but about how many citizen developers you have and how many applications?
So number of applications off the top of my head, I'm not sure for citizen, but maybe Rachel knows how many AppSheet applications we have. I don't know if Malta is here. I don't think I saw him. But it's about 1,200 citizen developers out of a population of around 200,000.
Cool.
So it's not huge. It's and to give you some comparison, for Google Workspace champions, who are sort of the change agents, we've got around 10,000 of those across the business. So it's smaller than the champions role, but it makes sense because it's also more involved and a bit more specialist in terms of skills.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, I think we have time for one more short question or some long closing remarks, depending on...
I don't have any long closing remarks, so I propose a small question is better.
All right. Going once, going twice. Okay, I'm going to hop back up here and say thank you, Reese, so much for chatting with us today about how Airbus has led their digital transformation, how you helped Airbus lead the digital transformation. Thanks, everybody.